Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas. This is how to create a Grand Theft Auto style game in Unity, and welcome to episode 29. In this tutorial, we're going to create a script which will allow us to shoot our NPC and then they will collapse onto the floor. Don't forget, click subscribe and click on the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial still to come in this series and everything else on game development on my channel. With that in mind, let's get to work. So up until now, we have the script which allows us to make the NPC run away. He walks around. We have a script which lets us fire our weapon. And realistically, we need to combine all these elements together to create one ultimate script which will allow us to detect when we're shooting him, and if we are, he collapses onto the floor. And obviously, depending on your preference, it could be 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots. It's entirely up to you. So we'll also make it capable of doing that as well. So how do we do that exactly? Well, we use something called Raycast. Raycast is a way of sending out an imaginary, well, I say imaginary, it is real in the game as it were, but you could theoretically put a line straight out in front of you and see what that line collides with. If it's the NPC, then we can actually do something. So we need to go to the script which will allow us to fire our weapon, which I believe is in here, and it's firing pistol. So if we open up the firing pistol script, a couple of variables that we'll need to add. So we're going to need to add a Raycast variable, which will go inside the update method. We'll add a damage amount, and we'll also add a way of transferring data from this script to another script, and that will be using a variable again. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to add 3 of those variables that I've just spoke about, and then obviously the 4th one will be inside the update method. So firstly, let's go public static, and it'll be a float, and we'll call this one distance from target. So this is going to be a way of determining how far away we are from our target. It's not going to matter too much in this script at the moment, but when we come to more advanced stuff later on in the series, for example, only being able to shoot at a certain distance, that's when this will come in handy. So we're kind of future-proofing our script with some of this stuff. So we'll call this distance from target. What has gone on there? Why'd you do that? Distance, helps if we don't put spaces, from target, semicolon. Next, I'm going to have an internal version of this, just so as I can see it at any point in the inspector panel. You don't necessarily have to have this if you don't want to. So public float to target. Next one is going to be the damage amount. So I'm going to set this as a number. So we'll establish what number it's going to be later on, but I'll explain why that number is relevant to the amount of times we can shoot the NPC. So public int shot damage, semicolon. So the next variable will go inside the update method, just because it's a bit more convenient, as it were. And that is going to be a Raycast hit, which I'm just going to call hit. So let's call it Raycast hit. And the name of it is literally hit. So we need to remember that word hit. Yes, I know it's underlined. Don't worry at the moment. So going a little bit further down, what we need to do is we need to go inside where we are firing the pistol itself. So that will be here. We're aiming and we're pressing the left mouse button. So we only want this to function when we do that. We don't really want the Raycast to be constantly trying to detect how far we are away from things. There's no point with this because we only need to detect as we're shooting. So in this little if statement, we need to put, if I can get my hands to work properly today. Lately, my tutorials have been all over the place because my hands won't type properly. So it's going to be if, and in brackets, physics, and in brackets again, we need to go transform dot position, and we need to tell it we need to go forward. So basically, we just put transform direction, and in brackets vector 3 dot forward, And I'm trying to think what else would happen next. So we've got that, haven't we? Transform, direction, vector 3 forward. And yeah, we need to output this variable that we put in up there, which is hit. So output hit. Close bracket, open curly bracket. And now we need to change that. That should be physics.raycast, because yes, we're using a raycast, so obviously that's got to be physics.raycast. Otherwise this won't work. So what we're doing here is we are sending out that imaginary kind of line to say go forward, because we're telling it to go forward here, and we want to out into hit. So whatever we get back from that raycast being sent out will go into this variable called hit, which we defined up here. So in doing so, we can actually use that to our advantage, because we can say to target equals hit dot distance. And again, this won't matter too much in this tutorial because we are future proofing here. We're not going to worry too much about how far we are away from a particular object, as it were, but like I say, we'll future proof. We'll also say that distance from target is equal to target. So again, future proof. Now we need to determine how much we want the shot damage to be. So how much health is our NPC going to have? And they could have 1 health, they could have 1,000,000 health. It's all relevant to what we type here for shot damage. Sorry. So if we want our NPC to go down in 1 shot, this number has to be the same as what we type later on in a separate script. So for now, to kind of stop me waffling, as it were, I am just going to put 20. So shot damage equals 20. And obviously we probably could change this. You know, if this ends up being a shotgun script, that could be 50, for example, because it does more damage. We also now need to send out a message to a different script. And this is clever in the way it works, because this will send a message to the object that it is collided with. So if this raycast hits the NPC as we're firing, it will send a message to another script that is attached to that NPC. And to do that, we go hit dot transform dot send message, and in brackets what we do here is the method name that we want to invoke. So for example, if our method in that script is called hurt NPC, then we're telling it with this line of code to start that method. So let's actually call that method that we're going to do hurt NPC. Okay, and then we're going to tell it we want to also send you this variable amount, which is going to be shot damage. So at this point, we also don't need to get anything back from that script. So it's kind of like a two-way street if you know, you want to have something returned to you into this script, but we don't need to. We only need this script to send out a message. We don't need it to hear anything back. So we can say send message options dot don't require receiver, because there's no point in that script sending us something back if we don't actually need it. So I'm going to save that script now. So a lot of this may not make any sense right now, and I get it. I get that it probably won't make sense, but it will make sense when we've written the other script. So remember this hurt NPC name, and remember that shot damage name. They're going to become very important when we write this next script. So at this point, what we've done is we have sent out a message to wherever this raycast is going to. We now need to write the script that will receive this and perform the actions when it's attached to our NPC. So there is a little bit, not really a bug, but it's kind of like an annoyance within Unity that sometimes when you have an object that is moving, the raycast won't properly work. So we're going to come up with a really cool, unique method to make sure that the raycast collides with the correct object. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a good old-fashioned cube. So game object, and we will go 3D object cube. And this cube has to basically encompass all of our NPC over here. So I'm going to have this, in fact, I will actually couple it to the NPC and 0 out the position. And then uncouple it and place it up here. I'll probably scale this to 2 by 2 and probably maybe 6 or so. So it kind of covers him in all directions. And down here, you know, if the terrain ever changes up or down, at least we've got all angles covered if that's around. And obviously this can be as big or as small as you want to. You've got to think of this as a target. So if this is really far away and really small, it's going to be very difficult to accurately hit this particular NPC. However, if it was like this, from the same distance, it's now going to be a little bit easier because that target is theoretically bigger. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to keep it as 3 by 6 by 3 for now, and I'm also going to tick is trigger. Reason I'm ticking is trigger is just so it doesn't accidentally collide with things that we don't necessarily need it to. And I'm also going to untick mesh renderer. So the NPC will continue to walk around as normal, there's no problems there. But when we write the next script, we're going to write a little extra something to make sure that this cube always relates to our NPC. So on that topic, let's actually rename that cube to NPC 001. I'll just put shot. So let's create that script. And this script is going to be great in the sense that it can be used for multiple NPCs. So let's go right click, create C# script, and we'll call this one NPC Death. So let's open that up in Visual Studio. It doesn't matter too much of what you call the script here, but remember it does matter what we call that method. So first things first, we're going to need to add in the namespace for AI. So using Unity engine.ai. Reason being is because we're going to be dealing a little bit with a nav mesh, i.e. turning it off when the NPC dies. Because if you don't, your NPC will do his death animation, he'll collapse on the floor, but he'll still slide along the floor. So it'll look a bit strange. So we do not need the void start method, and we don't need the annotations. We do, however, need a couple of variables. I think maybe 3 or 4, but we might do 1 just to check that we can see everything is working, but we'll see if we need to debug it. So public int, and this will be NPC health. I'm going to make this equal to 20. So remember that 20 number from before? We're taking 20 off this number within this script, which means that if the NPC health is 0, that's when he will die. If we put the NPC health as 40 here, it means that it will take 2 shots for our NPC to die. So this is where you can determine just how much health and how many shots it will take for your NPC to go down. I want them to go down in just 1 shot, so I'm going to have this as 20. Next, we need a bool to determine whether they are dead or not. So public bool, and we'll call this NPC dead, semicolon. In fact, by default, we'll make it false, just in case. Next, we need to have the NPC object itself. So public game object, NPC object. And then finally, there is one extra object we need to deal with, and that's that interaction trigger. Reason being is because if we don't disable that interaction trigger, then even when the NPC is dead on the floor, you still have the problem of them still talking to you because you're still trying to interact with them. So you just need to be a little bit mindful of that. So we'll call that just interaction trigger, I guess. So public game object interaction trigger, semicolon. So firstly, let's create that hurt NPC method. So void hurt NPC. Also, if you named your method something different in the firing pistol script, if you've called out something different, make sure you do name it the exact same here. And in parentheses, in the brackets, we need to put int and shot damage. Remember that shot damage comes over from the script for firing our pistol. And then open curly bracket that should be. And in here, we're going to say NPC health minus equals, so we're taking away the value of shot damage, semicolon. So hopefully you guys can see just how this is working now. When we are connecting with the NPC, we are invoking this method, we're starting it, and we're sending this value called shot damage of 20 over to here. So we're starting this method and saying shot damage is 20. So then we say NPC health take away 20, which means it becomes 0. So in the update method, that then means that we can use something really clever to say, hey, this will ultimately kill our NPC. So before we do that little bit, we're going to have to find a quick way of allowing this cube, which is the NPC 001 shot, to constantly follow our NPC. And that can be done real easily just by saying this dot game object dot transform dot position equals NPC object dot transform dot position. So it will always follow our NPC. And like I said, it can be a little bit funny the way Unity works sometimes. If by chance you want to put this script on the NPC itself and see if it works, you'll probably find that it will not work. It's a really peculiar thing. It's something that I've always done in this sense. So I always find this method kind of easy and it's easy to manipulate the script in the long term because we can easily copy this over and use it for different NPCs. So now we've got our collision cube following our actual NPC. We're then going to say if NPC health is less than or equal to 0, because it could theoretically be less than 0, remember, because if our shot damage does 25 but our NPC health is only 20, then that would end up as -5. So we need to cover all bases here and say if it's less than or equal to 0 and NPC dead equals false, then do the following. So what we're saying here is if it's hit 0 or less and the NPC isn't dead, which obviously they wouldn't be if we're doing this for the first time, then the first thing we do is say NPC dead equals true. And we now need to start a coroutine. And that coroutine is going to allow us to control a slight bit of time to allow our NPC to collapse onto the floor. So we're going to have start coroutine, and we can call this absolutely anything we want. So end NPC, for example, open close bracket, semicolon. So now we need to write that coroutine. I enumerator end NPC, open curly bracket, and we need to put here a couple of different things. So we need to turn off the AI script, we need to turn off the nav mesh component, and we need to disable the box collider as the first 3 things to do. So let's do that. NPC object dot get component, and it's going to be NPC AI open close bracket dot enabled equals false. And obviously if you've named your AI script something different, make sure it is the same name here. Next is NPC object dot get component spiky brackets, and this one is the nav mesh agent. So that's the reason why we have the namespace up here for AI. Open close bracket dot enabled equals false. And next is going to be the box collider, just so as we can't get stuck on the dead body, as it were. NPC object dot get component and box collider open close bracket dot enabled equals false. So the next thing we need to do is we need to turn off the box collider for this object that the script is going to be attached to. So that cube, this one. I know it's marked as trigger, so we could theoretically go through it, but it's always best to turn it off just in case. So this dot game object dot get component spiky brackets box collider close bracket dot enabled equals false. Next thing we need to do is we need to turn off that interaction trigger so as we can no longer interact with it, so it doesn't talk to us. So it's going to be interaction trigger dot set active false semicolon. Next we're going to wait for probably a 1/10 of a second. So yield return new wait for seconds, and it's curly brackets, normal brackets, just normal parentheses, 0.1 f because it's a float. And final thing to do before we can actually test this and more than likely deal with one bug which I know will probably occur is turn off or rather play the dying animation so it just collapses onto the floor. So npc object dot get component in spiky brackets animator close bracket dot play, and in brackets and quotes I believe the name of it is dying, but I think I probably should check just in case. Yes, dying is the animation name, so make sure you do get that one correct, otherwise it will not work. And save. So if you have any problems with this script at any point, I will leave this version of the script, well, when we've completed it, because I think we're going to probably add a couple more lines in, but it will be on my website. If you head over there, go to downloads, you'll be able to get it there. So now let's set up Unity so as this will all work correctly. So let's attach the script we have written. If I can find it, NPC Death goes on to NPC 001 shot. We need to set the NPC into NPC object and then interaction trigger right there and save. Now, I think this is going to come up a little bit strange because I'm expecting 2 bugs to occur. I just want to see if they do. I want to test this and see if they do happen. The first one is going to be that he will still cry out even though he's dead on the floor, saying, "Help me, help me." And the other one is there is a potential he will get back up from the dead and walk around again, which that's the one which I did find quite funny when testing this out before making this tutorial. So I'm going to save and press play. And with a bit of luck, we should be able to see our NPC take a hit. Okay, here we go. So I just saw him over there. So let's just test this to make sure that, yep, so he doesn't die because we didn't fire at him. There we go. Help! And there he goes, down on the floor. Awesome. So I'm just waiting for it to happen. I think, there we go. So he does indeed rise from the dead after a certain amount of time. But we can no longer do anything with him. So let's fix those 2 small bugs in this script. So we're back in the NPC Death Script. And the first thing we're going to do is turn off that help me, because obviously he was dead on the floor going, "Oh, help me." So public game object, I'll just put this as help me, semicolon. And down here in our coroutine, what we'll do is as soon as we play the dying animation, we will turn the help me object off. So help me.setActive false. Next thing we need to do is after, let's say, 3 seconds, let's turn that animator off. Turning off that animator means that he will no longer get back up and walk or look like he's walking around. So NPC object, in fact, do you know what? Let's copy that to there, place that there, and dot enabled equals false. And before that, let's have yield return new wait 4 seconds, and in brackets 3 semicolon, save, head back into Unity, and let's go to our NPC 001 shot and just add help me onto there. So now this should theoretically work flawlessly. We should be able to fire our weapon at him, he will collapse, he won't say anything after he's been shot, and he will no longer get up and pretend to walk around. Sometimes that's the beauty of game development, all the silly little bugs and glitches that you create. They can be quite amusing sometimes, they really can. So let's do this, and let's make sure. Awesome. So he should not get back up at all. He should be permanently on the floor. Cool. Excellent. So I'm quite happy with that. So obviously you can modify that a lot more than what we've created in this tutorial. You can go much further, create different methods, wait different times, make it multiple shots before he gets killed. And I would encourage you to do that. It's always good to take what you learn from these tutorials and advance them as much as you can. So next tutorial, what I would like to start doing is preparing for missions. So what I would realistically like to try and accomplish in the next tutorial is get some UI on the screen, things like a hint box, our wanted stars, some ammo, some cash, and also create a mission start point maybe somewhere here. So we start our mission and obviously we create it. So yeah, next tutorial is going to be all about some UI on screen and creating the start point for our mission. So until that next tutorial, guys, thank you very much for watching.